Have you ever been playing a game and spotted something that was overpowered or underpowered and thought, man, why don't the devs just do this? It's so simple. Because I sure as hell have. And yet, game balance is something notoriously difficult to get right. So what is it I was missing? What makes games so difficult to balance? When I discovered how powerful the backstab move was in the otherwise great Bejeweled-like brawler Battle Chef Brigade, I wondered why the devs hadn't taken the obvious steps to make it less powerful. It wasn't until later on I realised that while the move was certainly very good, it didn't adversely affect the play experience because there are other, equally abusable options like these special pots that make matching gems require pairs instead of trios. That's when I realised that I didn't actually know anything about how to balance games, and that it was seeming like balance itself isn't and should never be the goal when designing a game. Alright, hold your horses, that's a pretty big statement. Let me clarify. Many of the best developers in the business don't actually shoot for perfect balance, because having games that are imbalanced in just the right way leads to much more compelling and strategically interesting games, and that is what makes them so tough to get right. One of the most common misconceptions when it comes to balance is that games are designed with the aim of making sure that everything has an equal matchup. That is to say that any given strategy is supposed to be equally favoured against all other strategies. But in actuality, it's the wealth of tactical, strategic and moment-to-moment options you have available to you, in other words the depth of a game, that makes them interesting and fun to replay over and over again. Rock Paper Scissors is a theoretically perfectly balanced game, but due to its lack of depth it's been really struggling to break onto the esports scene. Oh. Even games with near perfect information and no variance are built around subtle imbalances. Lay people might think that chess is a perfectly balanced game, but talk to a grandmaster and they'll tell you the white completely decides the pace of the game because it gets to go first. And yet, despite the fact that this gives white a distinct statistical advantage in top level play, chess is one of the most played competitive sports in the world, and it's provably imbalanced. That's because despite white having an advantage, black has means of fighting back and undermining that position by playing in a more reactive, disruptive way. There's even whole books about playing just the black team in chess, and it's that power struggle that has made the game into something we still haven't quite figured out, despite appearing to be perfectly balanced. See, designers are very rarely working to create true balance, but something closer to an equilibrium, where a variety of possible gameplay options exist, but each one has its own strengths, weaknesses and counterplay options. A great example of this is in Magic the Gathering's Colour Pie, which unfortunately is not a rainbow coloured baked treat but a boring game design thing, I know, I was disappointed too. These 5 colours exist to divide up the game's major mechanics so that no one deck can reliably access them all. A green deck might have the biggest creatures and the most mana and can easily run away with the game if allowed to get rolling, but the 2 colours opposite it, blue and black, have mechanics best suited to dealing with green. Blue can stop green's big stompy creatures from ever hitting the board, and black has ways of killing green's cards outright if they ever do. If green wants to make a larger number of weaker dudes that can't all be dealt with, or to rush down the other player with high damage cards, then they could try including some white or red cards respectively, diluting their deck's consistency in exchange for versatility. When you consider that any colour can be viably mixed with any other colour, or even 2 other colours in some cases, the number of possible flavours of deck is huge, but they'll always be at least partially kept in check by their so-called enemy colours, helping to keep the metagame from becoming too skewed in the favour of one deck. In Magic's history, there's usually always been a colour or combination of colours that's been the best, but because the game is held in equilibrium, there's still a variety of interesting decisions to be made in how to take down the biggest decks that stops the metagame from becoming stagnant. While Magic might use this phenomena consciously in its design, balance can be better understood as an equilibrium of multiple factors in almost any game. With this info in hand, we can move neatly onto my second lesson. You might have noticed that devs often shy away from using the terms over or underpowered, but we use them all the time, so why is that? I think it's because this terminology doesn't actually address the heart of the issue. Let me show you an Overwatch tier list to explain what I'm getting at. You've probably seen a tier list before, the most powerful characters are at the top, and the weakest ones are at the bottom. Oh, speaking of which, these guys are clearly wrong, let me just... There we go. David Serlin, balance man for Street Fighter 2 Turbo and game designer, says that tier lists can be usually divided into God tier, high tier, mid tier, low tier, and garbage tier. The jury's still out on a special Bastion tier, but I'm getting through. In these middle ones, sure, some characters might be better than others, but with smart play they can all be perfectly valid choices. just like we saw in Magic the Gathering. It's the top and bottom ones you've got to worry about. sliiight says, "My first goal of balancing is to get the god tier empty. Of course, some character will always end up the strongest or tie for strongest, and that's okay, but a god tier character is so strong as to make the rest of the game obsolete." The same applies for the garbage tier characters. There's almost no reason to use them as they're an active detriment relative to other choices. The issue here is in viable play options. The more viable options there are, the harder your game is to balance, but also the deeper and more diverse your game strategies are. God tier characters invalidate options, and garbage tier ones are themselves invalid, and maybe too weak to fill their role in the equilibrium to keep the power players in check. This is why overpowered and underpowered don't really work, because they're static descriptors for a variable problem. In our example here, if this lady who's called Sombra's magic ability nullifying hacking was made stronger, Reinhardt, who's very reliant on his shield ability, would become less powerful, as Sombra can now counter him more effectively. Reinhardt hasn't been changed, so he's just as overpowered as he was before, but he's now no longer in god tier, increasing the number of viable play options available, as characters like Torbjorn can also move up thanks to the reduced threat of Reinhardt. Notice how this hypothetical Overwatch patch, that between you and me might not even work, doesn't even touch the overpowered character, but still makes the game more diverse. But you might be thinking, why not just cut out the middleman and make Reinhardt's shield less powerful? See, the idea of a balanced equilibrium is kind of a double-edged sword. By making Reinhardt less powerful directly, you allow the projectile-based characters he counters, such as Hanzo and Junkrat, who are already very powerful, to run rampant, and you never want to reward a Hanzo player. Often when balancing, it's better to use a light touch and to buff weak strategies rather than nerf powerful ones, as overzealous changes will throw the entire game's equilibrium out of whack. In this case, in order to counter Reinhardt, a team will need to include Sombra in their lineup, meaning that's one less person to take advantage of him being in a weakened state. sliiight has a lot more to say about balance, but his thoughts on tier lists are the most important takeaway here. It's not the job of a designer to make a game 100% balanced, only to make sure that the player's skill or intelligence is the defining factor in how well they do, rather than whether they can just use the god tier option or not. Once players are allowed to compete on a roughly equal playing field, they'll start to create their own Magic the Gathering-esque balance equilibrium on their own that only needs small changes to keep it in check. That's why devs seem to make unconventional balance changes, because they know things aren't quite as simple as over or underpowered. And the good ones know that maximising the number of viable play options is what's needed to ensure a game remains fun and satisfying to play, not nerfing problem strategies into oblivion and likely just creating a new god tier in its place. Speaking of which, Hearthstone is a game with its fair share of historic balance issues, like most Blizzard games really, but there's one example of great design I want to show off that uses balance to communicate to new players in a really cool way. And to do that, I'll need to introduce you all to one of the best designed cards in Hearthstone. It is my pleasure to introduce, for your viewing enjoyment, Magma Rager. Oh, you wait for me to tell you I was joking and to show you the real card? No, I'm actually just talking about Magma Rager. Seriously, stick with me. Magma Rager is a bad card. Very bad even. It'll go straight into sliiight's garbage tier. But put yourself in the mind of a totally new player who doesn't know the card pool at all, but does have access to the basic set, of which Magma Rager is a part. He's pretty cheap, he's got a cool name, and ooh, that's a big number right there. New players will quickly realise that Magma Ragers are a potentially big damage source for only 3 mana, so they'll often be included in Baby's first custom deck. The thing is, despite its hefty attack power, Magma Rager is very fragile, doesn't do anything on the turn it arrives, plus your opponent can deal with it in a variety of ways. They can attack the low health Magma Rager with almost any minion and totally scupper your plans very efficiently. Many of the classes have hero powers, abilities which are always available and cost 1 mana less than Mr. Rager, that can deal with it effectively by smacking it with 1 damage directly, or by creating small minions that can kill it easily. Or they could slap down a taunt minion, which have to be attacked before their owner, meaning the Magma Rager will either have to not do anything, or attack into them and die, because it's only got 1 health. For a Hearthstone vet, these are obvious reasons why Magma Rager sucks. But for a noob, it's taught them about the importance of efficient trading, using your hero power and taunt minions in a real gameplay scenario. While Magma Rager itself will never see serious play, its terribleness has created a bunch of new, significantly more viable play options in the mind of our new player that they might not have considered without it. like the speedy Wolf Rider who can deal damage and pay for itself immediately, or the bulkier Chillwind Yeti who's much beefier and can usually take down 2 minions for the price of 1. This phenomena in game design is called pushing, because it pushes players in a certain gameplay direction and it's difficult to see from the perspective of a player. To us, we're just attempting to optimize our gameplay as per usual, but for developers, altering balance is an excellent tool to shape gameplay experiences. For example, in Rocket League, flying around with your booster is the most fun part of the game, so the floaty ball physics and plentiful boost pickups make doing just that a powerful strategy. For another example, take the Skaven in Warhammer Total War 2. In the backstory, they're presented as a race of uncountable hordes of smelly ratmen. Thing is, this kind of swarm strategy is super boring to actually play, and isn't exactly tactical. You run your dudes at the enemy and then either they die or they don't. Usually the former. So instead, Creative Assembly gave the Skaven really powerful artillery units and god-awful infantry. This means you still get the cool feeling of sending in waves of dumb rat slaves to dogpile the enemy, but now you have to use them tactically as a meat shield for your more powerful troops, because the Skaven infantry will never win a straight up fight, but their big boys are vulnerable without meat shields to protect them. So let's go back to that original question. Why is balancing games so difficult? Well, the answer is that because game balance works in equilibrium, it's impossible to change just one thing. Instead, any balance adjustment creates a ripple effect that changes the whole game. This means that obvious fixes might create worse problems and that perfectly viable play strategies can be muscled out by god tier alternatives. Devs need to tread carefully and make small, indirect adjustments to make sure as many strategies as possible are viable. But what's our role in this? Well, generally speaking, we can't see the big picture design ethos that governs the game's balance equilibrium, nor can we really tell when we're being pushed. So when suggesting balance changes, the average Joe doesn't really know what they're talking about. However, because players aren't bogged down by how a game ought to be, they can understand games on a more innate level than the devs that made them. Many players will know instinctively when something just kind of feels off, be it bad to lose against or that it's just not quite powerful enough. While the suggestions to fix it might not be on the money, great devs pay attention to the more constructive and coherent feedback to try and diagnose the underlying cause. A great contemporary example is in the case of popular view generation software, Fortnite. A long-standing complaint in the game was the shotgun class of weapons. They're high damage, easy to find, and were considered to be essentially the optimal pick. Epic tried nerfing shotguns, but people still complained about them. It turns out that it wasn't shotguns that were at fault, but Fortnite's building mechanics that allowed players to hide in massive structures, traverse terrain and create cover wherever they liked, forcing fights into close quarters where shotguns were king. So Epic reduced the amount of resources that were available, lowering the prevalence of build fights, and made explosives that could punch through large buildings more plentiful. Now the game seems like it's in a pretty good place as far as I can see, and the complaints have largely stopped. But people are now complaining about wanting more build fights back. Point is, players will never be happy, but their intuition is invaluable. Video games, like all art, are very complicated, and no one's really got the right answers. But I think it's important to demystify a lot of the most important factors of game design, not only so we can give devs a well-deserved break from our complaining, but so we can also appreciate games and their construction much more effectively. With the knowledge of how games are balanced in hand, we can kind of begin to see the underlying reasons why certain decisions get made, and can more consciously think about what the best way to play a game is by paying attention to whether certain mechanics are being pushed or not. Balance is a very tricky topic, and I've barely scratched the surface here. But as always, there are some cool links to much smarter people talking about the same stuff in the description, so go and check them out. Right, now that I've cemented myself as an authority on the subject, here's my pitch to fix Overwatch forever. We double down on the part of the game everyone likes best. Yes, I'm of course talking about turning every character into an identical clone of Bastion. I'm sorry? Which one of us has the YouTube channel? Yeah, I thought so. This video and others like it were made possible thanks to, you guessed it, my Patreon supporters. If you liked the video, please consider giving me money to fuel my spiral into Frazzles-induced obesity. A very special $10 thank you to Samuel Vanderplatz, Patrick Romberg, Alex Deloche, Baxter Heel, Strateger in Ultima, Dominic Sudlow, Daniel Metges, Apotropos, Asaran, Brian Notariani, Vodjam Palagora, Asteroid Baby, and Chow. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!